Captain Elias Voss's eyes were locked on the flickering control panel, his pulse racing. He was alone in the cockpit of the Stalwart, a ship meant for long-range exploration, not for navigating through violent, uncharted storms. The dense clouds surrounding Lyria 7 crackled with electric blue lightning, and the ship shuddered as another bolt hit its hull, sending sparks flying. "Come on, stay with me." Elias gritted his teeth, fighting against the controls. The engines groaned in protest, alarms blared, and a screen flashed warnings in rapid succession: system failure. Emergency descent imminent. He was too far from the nearest human outpost to call for help. The mission to survey this edge-of-the-galaxy planet had been risky, but the promise of untouched resources had lured him here. Now, it looked like he was about to pay the price. The ship tore through the thick atmosphere, its hull screaming as it descended. Elias's knuckles turned white as he gripped the yoke, attempting to steer toward a relatively clear patch of ground he'd glimpsed through the storm. But fate had other plans. A final, blinding bolt of lightning struck, and the Stalwart plummeted like a stone. The impact was brutal. Metal screamed, and Elias was thrown against his seat restraints as the ship's frame buckled. For a few heart-stopping moments, all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. Then, silence. Groaning, Elias unclipped his harness and staggered to his feet. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and smoke filled the cockpit. He grabbed an emergency kit and stumbled toward the airlock. The sensors had already failed, but he knew he had to get out before the interior became a death trap. The hatch hissed open, and a rush of humid air hit him. The world outside was a wall of sound. Rain poured in torrents, drumming on the jungle canopy like a relentless symphony. Elias squinted through the downpour, the alien landscape beyond illuminated in flashes of blue light. He stepped out of the wreckage, the mud swallowing his boots as he tried to get his bearings. The forest around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The trees towered like spires, their bark shimmering with a faint bioluminescence. Massive, leaf-like fronds glowed in soft purples and greens, casting an otherworldly light that barely penetrated the curtain of rain. Elias activated his wrist scanner, hoping to find some indication of shelter or signs of intelligent life, but the storm was interfering with its readings. A burst of static erupted from the device, forcing him to smack it in frustration. Then, through the relentless noise of the storm, he heard something else, a soft, almost musical sound. It was a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakably feminine. "Help me." He froze, straining to hear over the wind and rain. Was it a hallucination, or had someone truly called out to him? Against his better judgment, Elias followed the sound, pushing through the dense undergrowth. The bioluminescent plants pulsed softly as if responding to his presence, lighting a path through the otherwise dark jungle. The voice grew clearer as he trudged on, and soon he found himself standing before a figure hidden beneath a canopy of shimmering leaves. She was unlike anything he'd ever encountered: slender, ethereal, with skin that seemed to ripple like liquid silver under the rain. Her eyes were large and luminous, like twin moons reflecting the stormy sky. Elias took a step back, his instincts screaming caution, but the girl raised a delicate hand, her expression one of desperation. "Please. I mean you no harm," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "The storm, it is dangerous here. You must come with me." Elias hesitated, searching her eyes for any hint of deception. But there was only fear and sincerity. He glanced up at the roiling sky. The rain was coming down even harder now, each drop feeling like a needle against his skin. "If this is a trap, you're not going to like my reaction," he warned, his hand instinctively hovering near the pistol strapped to his side. The alien girl's gaze flickered to the weapon, her expression unreadable, but she simply nodded. "I would not risk deceiving you. Follow me, and you will be safe." She turned and moved with surprising agility through the jungle, her movements fluid and graceful despite the slippery terrain. Elias followed, keeping a cautious distance. As they went deeper into the forest, the storm seemed to lessen in intensity, as if the trees themselves were providing some kind of protection. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a hidden entrance in the rock face, a natural cave, covered in a curtain of vines. The girl pushed them aside, revealing a narrow tunnel that glowed with the same soft light as the plants outside. "Here," she said, gesturing for him to enter. "The storm cannot reach us here." Elias paused, scanning the entrance one more time before stepping into the cave. The air inside was warm, and the ground was dry, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The girl followed him, letting the curtain of vines fall back into place, muffling the sound of the storm. "My name is Alira," she said, bowing her head slightly. "You are lucky to have survived the storm. Few who come here do." Elias was still catching his breath, but he managed a nod. "Captain Elias Voss," he replied. What are you?" Alira smiled faintly, her luminous eyes reflecting the soft glow of the cave walls. "I am of this world, but my people rarely encounter your kind. Not for a long time." Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued but wary. "You said the storm was dangerous. What did you mean?" Alira's expression turned grave. "The storms are not natural. They are generated by the Sky Warden, an ancient device that protects Lyria 7. It reacts to intruders, especially those not of this world." Elias's heart sank. If this Sky Warden was targeting him, then escaping the planet would be nearly impossible. "Can it be shut down?" he asked. Alira nodded slowly. "It can, but only if one is brave enough to venture into its core. My people cannot get close, but perhaps you, with your resilience, can succeed where we have failed." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. Elias leaned against the cave wall, exhaustion beginning to catch up with him. "You brought me here to ask for my help," he realized. Alira's gaze dropped to the ground. "Yes, but I am willing to offer you something in return." She hesitated, then added in a softer voice, "I will do whatever you ask, even if it means offering myself as compensation." Elias's eyes widened at her words, unsure if he had heard correctly. Alira looked up, her expression sincere yet tinged with an emotion he couldn't quite identify: fear, hope, or perhaps both. Before he could respond, another tremor shook the ground beneath their feet. The storm outside was growing even fiercer, as if the Sky Warden sensed their intentions. Elias met Alira's gaze, seeing a desperate plea behind those luminous eyes. Whether it was a trap or genuine, he knew he was out of options. "All right," he said, exhaling sharply. "I'll help you. But once the storm clears, we're going to have a long talk about what you really want." Alira's face softened with relief, and for the first time, Elias thought he saw a hint of a smile. "Thank you, Captain Voss," she whispered. "I promise. I will not betray your trust." And so, the human and the alien stood side by side in the shelter of the cave, preparing for a journey that would decide both of their fates as the storm raged on beyond their hidden refuge. The warmth of the cave enveloped Elias as he leaned back against the rough stone wall, the exhaustion from the crash beginning to seep into his bones. Alira was already moving about the small cavern, her movements graceful and fluid. She gathered what looked like dried herbs and strange, glowing fungi from alcoves along the walls, her iridescent skin casting soft reflections in the dim light. Elias watched her cautiously, still unsure whether to trust her. He couldn't afford to lower his guard, especially on an alien planet where everything seemed to have a hidden danger. His ship was ruined, his communications equipment fried, and the storm outside made it impossible to even attempt a signal to human space. For now, this cave and Alira were his only options. "Here," Alira said softly, breaking his thoughts. She approached him with a small, intricately carved bowl filled with a steaming liquid that smelled vaguely like cinnamon mixed with something more exotic. "Drink this. It will help you recover." Elias hesitated, eyeing the strange brew. "How do I know it's not poison?" Alira's luminous eyes softened, a hint of sadness flickering within them. If I wished you harm, I would not have led you to safety, she replied, her voice tinged with a quiet sincerity. You are free to refuse, but it would be a waste of my effort to have saved you. Taking a cautious sniff of the steam, Elias decided to take the risk. He lifted the bowl to his lips and sipped. The warmth spread through him almost immediately, easing the tension in his muscles and clearing the fog of exhaustion from his mind. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, the soothing effects of the drink calming him. Elira watched him closely, her silver eyes reflecting the bioluminescent glow of the cave walls. I see that your strength is returning, she observed with a faint smile. The herbs have medicinal properties unique to Lyria 7. They heal wounds and restore vitality. Elias set the bowl down, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Why are you helping me? He asked, cutting to the heart of his suspicions. Your people must know about outsiders, why not let me die out there? Elira's expression darkened, and she looked away, her shoulders tensing. My people, they are wary of strangers, especially humans, she admitted. Centuries ago, we were visited by others like you. They came to our world with promises of peace, but brought only destruction. Elias frowned, feeling a pang of guilt even though he had nothing to do with those past encounters. I'm not like them, he said, his voice low and steady. I'm just an explorer, looking to chart unknown worlds. Elira's gaze returned to him, and this time there was a flicker of something warmer hope, perhaps? I want to believe you, she whispered, but it's difficult to forget the scars left by those who came before. The air between them grew thick with unspoken tension. Elias could see the conflict in her eyes, a battle between distrust and the desire for an alliance. He decided to change the subject, knowing that pressing her would only drive a wedge between them. You mentioned the Sky Warden, Elias said, shifting the conversation. What exactly is it? And why does it target anything that comes near this planet? Elira's expression grew serious, and she moved to sit beside him on a smooth rock. She drew in a deep breath before speaking. The Sky Warden is a relic left behind by the ancestors, an ancient race that once ruled this world. They designed it to protect Lyria 7 from invaders, but over time, it became unstable. Unstable how? Elias asked, leaning forward. It's supposed to only react to threats, Elira explained, her voice tinged with frustration. But now it views any foreign object, any life form not native to this planet, as a danger. The storms it generates are a form of defense, violent electrical discharges and energy pulses that disrupt technology. Elias ran a hand through his damp hair, digesting the information. And you think I can disable it? He asked, not hiding his skepticism. I'm just a pilot, not some kind of miracle worker. Elira turned to him, her eyes shimmering with a determination that surprised him. You have the knowledge and technology that we lack. My people, we are bound to this world. The Sky Warden's core is surrounded by layers of energy fields that repel us, but it does not affect humans in the same way. Elias was beginning to understand the gravity of what she was asking. If the Sky Warden was as powerful as she claimed, disabling it would be no easy feat, but without it, he'd never be able to send a signal for help, let alone survive long enough to repair his ship. What's in it for you? He asked, narrowing his eyes. What do you gain by helping me? Elira hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. My people are dying, she said quietly. The Sky Warden storms have become more frequent, more intense. It is not just outsiders it seeks to destroy, it's slowly tearing apart the very ecosystem of our world. Elias felt a pang of sympathy. He had seen firsthand what unchecked technology could do to a world. If what she said was true, then the Sky Warden was no longer a protector but a threat to the very planet it was designed to safeguard. Elira's voice grew softer, almost hesitant. And if you succeed, if you save my world, I will fulfill my promise to you. Elias met her gaze, remembering her words from earlier. There was a sincerity in her eyes, but also a flicker of something else, something that hinted at deeper motives. You keep mentioning this promise, he said slowly. What exactly do you mean? Elira's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of silver, and she looked away. Among my people, we do not ask for help without offering something in return, she explained. You are risking your life for us. In exchange, I will offer myself to you, however you desire. The bluntness of her words caught Elias off guard. He opened his mouth to protest, to say that he wasn't interested in taking advantage of her desperation, but Elira held up a hand to stop him. It is not just an obligation, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. If you succeed, it will be by your own strength and will. But if you fail, we will both perish in the storms. Elias exhaled slowly, the weight of her words settling on him. He wasn't entirely sure what she meant, or if he was ready to accept what she was offering, but for now, he needed her help just as much as she needed his. All right, he finally said, running a hand through his hair. I'll help you disable the Sky Warden. But no promises beyond that. Elira nodded, relief flooding her features. Thank you, Elias, she said softly. We should rest tonight. The journey to the Sky Warden's core will not be easy. She rose gracefully, moving to gather more herbs and supplies from hidden crevices in the cave. Elias watched her for a moment, trying to shake off the lingering doubts that gnawed at him. There was still so much he didn't understand about this world, about her motives, and even about the Sky Warden itself. But one thing was clear, the storm outside was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, he would need every ounce of strength, wit, and trust to survive. As he lay down on the makeshift bed Elira had prepared, the echoes of the storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. In the darkness of the cave, with only the soft glow of the fungi illuminating the walls, he couldn't help but wonder if he was walking into a trap or the beginning of something far more profound than he could ever imagine. The morning light on Lyria 7 was soft and diffused, a silvery mist hanging in the air like a veil as the remnants of the storm slowly dissipated. Elias awoke to the gentle sound of water dripping from the leaves outside the cave. For a moment, he forgot where he was, lulled by the strange, alien tranquility. Then, reality set in. He was stranded on an unknown planet, about to embark on a dangerous mission with a mysterious alien companion. Elira was already up, kneeling beside a small fire she had somehow managed to coax to life. The firelight danced across her silvery skin, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Elias stretched and walked over, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Eat, Elira said softly, handing him a piece of strange, purple fruit that smelled sweet and tangy. You will need your strength for the journey ahead. Elias accepted the fruit and took a cautious bite. It was surprisingly delicious, the sweetness mingled with a burst of refreshing tartness. As he ate, he watched Elira move with practiced efficiency, packing supplies into a woven bag made from some kind of plant fiber. We should leave soon, she said, her tone more serious than before. The Sky Warden storms are unpredictable. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes. Elias nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. They were about to venture deep into hostile territory to disable an ancient device neither of them fully understood. But he knew he had no choice if he ever wanted to leave this planet. The Sky Warden had to be shut down. Once they were ready, Elira led him out of the cave and into the dense jungle. The rain had left the ground slick, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of wet soil and foliage. The forest around them was alive with movement. Strange creatures, small and luminescent, scurried among the branches, their eyes reflecting the soft glow of the trees. As they walked, Elira kept a wary eye on their surroundings, her movements as fluid as the creatures that called this jungle home. Elias couldn't help but admire how effortlessly she navigated the treacherous terrain, while he struggled to keep up, slipping on the slick ground more than once. What are those things? Elias asked, pointing to a cluster of glowing, insect-like creatures hovering near a massive, flowering plant. Glow sprites, Elira replied, her tone almost fond. They are harmless, feeding on the nectar of the night-blooming flowers. But be wary, many other creatures here are not so gentle. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional distant rumble of thunder. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The bioluminescent trees grew taller, their roots like thick cables winding through the ground, creating a labyrinthine network. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder repeatedly, but Aelira seemed unfazed. "You sense it, don't you?" she finally said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "The forest itself is alive. It can feel our presence." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" "The trees are sentient?" "Not in the way you understand," Aelira explained. "The ancestors who built the Skywarden were masters of bioengineering. They created this forest to act as a secondary defense system, one that can detect and repel intruders." A chill ran down Elias's spine. If the forest was some kind of ancient security system, then it made sense why Aelira's people avoided the Skywarden. He wondered how long they could stay unnoticed. As if in response to his thoughts, a loud rustling came from the bushes to their left. Before Elias could react, something leaped out, a creature the size of a wolf, with skin like black glass and eyes that glowed a sickly green. Its maw was lined with rows of jagged teeth, dripping with a viscous, glowing fluid. "A watcher beast!" Aelira shouted. "Run!" But Elias was already moving. He sprinted after Aelira as she darted through the dense foliage, her slender form barely disturbing the leaves. The creature behind them snarled, crashing through the underbrush with terrifying speed. "Over here!" Aelira shouted, veering sharply to the right. Elias followed, his heart pounding in his chest. She led him into a narrow ravine covered by a curtain of thick vines. As they squeezed through the gap, the creature lunged but collided with the dense vegetation, letting out a frustrated roar. Breathless, they paused to catch their breath. Elias's legs burned from the exertion, but Aelira seemed almost unaffected, her eyes scanning their surroundings for any other threats. "Are there more of those watcher beasts?" Elias panted, trying to calm his racing heart. "Yes," Aelira replied grimly. "They are guardians left behind by the ancestors to patrol the jungle. They are drawn to anything not native to this world, especially to technology. The closer we get to the Skywarden, the more of them we will encounter." Elias groaned inwardly. As if this mission wasn't hard enough already. "And you're sure you know a way past them?" Aelira nodded, though there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. "There is a hidden path, one known only to my people. It is treacherous, but it will take us to the Skywarden's core without drawing too much attention." Trusting her was a risk, but Elias had no choice. He adjusted the strap of his gear and nodded. "Lead the way." The terrain grew increasingly difficult as they climbed higher into the mountains that surrounded the Skywarden. The dense jungle gave way to rocky cliffs, where the wind howled like a living thing. The sky overhead was churning with dark clouds, and the faint hum of energy in the air signaled that the Skywarden was aware of their approach. Aelira paused at a narrow ledge overlooking a deep chasm. In the distance, Elias could finally see it, the Skywarden. It rose from the ground like a massive obelisk, its surface covered in shifting, iridescent patterns. The structure seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and arcs of blue lightning periodically crackled along its surface. "We're almost there," Aelira said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "But the hardest part is yet to come." As they continued along the ledge, the ground beneath them trembled. A sudden burst of lightning shot from the Skywarden, striking the ground just meters away. Elias stumbled, almost losing his balance, but Aelira grabbed his arm and pulled him to safety. "It's trying to stop us," Aelira shouted over the roaring wind. "The closer we get, the more aggressive it will become." Elias gritted his teeth, determination flooding through him. "Let's keep moving." They pushed onward, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. Finally, they reached a narrow crevice that led directly into the base of the Skywarden. The entrance was hidden beneath a curtain of thick vines, just as Aelira had promised. "This way," she urged, slipping through the opening. Elias followed, his heart racing. Inside, the air was strangely still, the sound of the storm outside muted as if they had entered another world entirely. The interior of the Skywarden was a maze of corridors and chambers, the walls covered in glowing glyphs that shifted and changed as they walked past. The energy in the air was almost suffocating, a constant, throbbing pulse that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. "What now?" Elias asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber they had entered. Aelira's eyes darted around, searching for something. "The control core is in the center. We must reach it and disable the energy conduits. But be careful, there are traps designed to stop anyone who tries." Before they could move further, a low hum filled the chamber. Mechanical sentinels, sleek and spider-like, began to emerge from the walls, their eyes glowing a menacing red. Elias pulled his pistol, but Aelira shook her head. "Weapons will only draw more of them. We need to move now." They sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, dodging energy blasts and leaping over tripwires that erupted with bursts of electric energy. Elias's lungs burned, and sweat poured down his face, but Aelira's determination drove him forward. At last, they reached a massive door covered in more glowing glyphs. Aelira placed her hands on a control panel, and the door slowly ground open, revealing the Skywarden's core, a vast, crystalline chamber bathed in an otherworldly light. "This is it," Aelira said, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "Now, we must shut it down." As they stepped into the core, the ground trembled again, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. The Skywarden was not about to let them succeed without a fight. The crystalline chamber was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. It was as if they had stepped into the heart of a living entity. The walls pulsed with vibrant, shifting colors, casting an eerie glow on the angular surfaces and intricate alien machinery that hummed with a life of its own. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, and a low, rhythmic thrum echoed through the space, like the heartbeat of some colossal beast. Aelira moved with urgency, her slender fingers tracing the ancient glyphs on the nearest console. Elias watched as she worked, her face a mask of concentration, but the chamber was filled with a tension that made it hard for him to breathe. He could feel the oppressive energy of the Skywarden, almost as if it were aware of their presence and was preparing to defend itself. "We don't have much time," Aelira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The system will recognize we've breached its core any moment now." Elias took a step forward, surveying the chamber for any immediate threats. "What exactly are we looking for? How do we shut it down?" Aelira turned to him, her eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "We need to overload the energy conduits feeding power to the central crystal," she explained, pointing toward a massive structure in the center of the room. The crystal hovered above a pedestal, crackling with arcs of blue energy. "But doing so will cause a chain reaction. Once it starts, we'll have only minutes to escape." Elias nodded, his jaw set. "Let's do it, then. What do you need me to do?" Aelira's gaze softened for a moment, and she reached out to touch his arm. "You must trust me. When I tell you to, you'll need to connect the human device you carry to the control interface." She gestured to the data pad Elias had salvaged from his wrecked ship. "It will act as a catalyst to overload the system." "Got it," Elias replied, pulling the data pad from his pack. He moved toward the console Aelira had indicated, but before he could reach it, the chamber was filled with a deafening roar. The ground beneath them trembled, and from hidden alcoves in the walls, more of the spider-like sentinels began to emerge. Their eyes glowed an ominous red, and they advanced with a cold, mechanical precision. "Aelira, hurry!" Elias shouted, drawing his pistol and firing at the nearest sentinel. The shots ricocheted off their armored exteriors, barely slowing them down. He switched to his knife, slashing at the nearest one, but for every sentinel he downed, two more seemed to take its place. Aelira was frantically tapping sequences into the console, her fingers moving in a blur. Just a few more seconds, she cried out, her voice tinged with desperation. Elias grunted as a sentinel lunged at him, its razor-sharp limbs slashing through the air. He managed to dodge the blow, but another sentinel struck him from behind, knocking him to the ground. As it loomed over him, ready to strike, Aelira turned and unleashed a burst of energy from her hands. A wave of shimmering light engulfed the sentinel, causing it to convulse and collapse in a heap. Elias scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. "How did you dash?" "There's no time to explain." Aelira interrupted, her voice urgent. "The system is primed. Now, connect your device now." Elias sprinted to the console, fumbling to connect his data pad to the interface. The moment he did, a surge of energy shot through the room. The crystal in the center began to pulse erratically, its light intensifying until it was almost blinding. "It's working!" Aelira shouted, her voice filled with both relief and fear. "But the system is trying to stabilize. We need to destroy the primary conduit." Elias's mind raced as he looked around. In the chaos, he spotted a series of glowing cables snaking from the pedestal to the walls. Without thinking, he pulled out an explosive charge he had taken from his ship's emergency kit. "I hope this is enough," he muttered, setting the timer and throwing the charge at the base of the crystal. He grabbed Aelira's hand. "We need to get out of here now." The moment the charge detonated, the entire chamber shook violently. The crystal exploded in a burst of blinding light, sending shards of energy-infused fragments in every direction. Alarms blared, and the floor beneath them began to crack. "This way!" Aelira shouted, pulling Elias toward a narrow passageway that had opened in the chaos. They sprinted through the corridor as the Sky Warden's core began to collapse, the walls groaning and splintering as the system went into a full meltdown. The heat was unbearable, and Elias could feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. Aelira led him through a labyrinth of collapsing tunnels, her knowledge of the structure saving them from being crushed by falling debris. Behind them, the sound of explosions and collapsing stone echoed like the growl of an angry god. Finally, they burst through an exit and stumbled out into the open air, the wind whipping around them. The storm clouds above were dissipating, the oppressive energy that had saturated the atmosphere vanishing as the Sky Warden's influence began to fade. Elias collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, while Aelira stood beside him, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her own breath. The sky, once dark and foreboding, was now clearing, revealing the twin suns of Lyria's 7 rising on the horizon. The jungle around them seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as the heavy, oppressive aura lifted. "It's over," Elias said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We did it." Aelira turned to him, her eyes glistening with something between relief and gratitude. "Yes, you did it," she corrected, kneeling beside him. "You saved my world, Elias." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the enormity of what they had accomplished settling in. But then, Aelira's expression changed, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. "What's wrong?" Elias asked, his brow furrowing. Aelira looked away, her voice barely audible. "I made a promise to you, Captain Voss. You saved my world, and now I am bound to fulfill my promise." Elias reached out and gently took her hand. "Aelira," he said softly, "I didn't do this for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do. You don't owe me anything." Aelira's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she nodded slowly. "But I want to stay," she whispered. "If you will have me, I wish to accompany you, to learn more of your world, your people, and perhaps, to discover what lies beyond the stars." Elias was taken aback. He hadn't expected her to say that. He thought she would want to stay with her people now that they were free from the Sky Warden's tyranny. But looking into her eyes, he realized that Aelira's desire for freedom extended beyond her planet. "I can't promise you it will be easy," Elias said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "But if you want to come with me, I would be honored." Alira's face lit up with a radiant smile, and she leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. "Then it's settled," she said softly. "Until the stars themselves grow dim, I will be by your side." As the twin suns rose higher into the sky, Elias and Alira stood together on the cliffside, watching as the jumble of Lyria 7 came alive in the new dawn. The storm had passed, and with it, a new chapter in their lives had begun, one filled with adventure, uncertainty, and the promise of something far greater than either of them could have ever imagined.